anger management honestly comes forth with a little bit of misnomer. And the best way to describe this is I had worked with a number of individuals throughout the past years, especially with a psychologist and a psychiatrist. And they worked with individuals in a program called anger management. And in that anger management program, they were teaching people how to manage anger or their angry outbursts or their anger responses in situations. And quite frankly, I believe that that loses sight of the fact that, for one thing, all manner of corruption emerges from the order of principalities, the spiritual realm, so that if there is a captive, the anger, spirit of anger present within an individual, there is first spiritual influence. So in my understanding, what I was teaching them was the importance to teach people to surrender into God's presence, then release the spirit of anger, now look at the situation anew. So you actually make a conscious decision to choose a different path. Well, they started applying this technique and actually called me back about 4 months later, quite angered with me. They were quite angry with me in the fact that they got rid of all their people. They had like 40 people coming to anger management courses, but once they understood this, they were no longer having to manage anger because they released the spiritual anger and embraced God's presence within that place. And in their anger with me, they were choosing a new direction, that they were so frustrated that they didn't have the 40 people to fund their life experience, to support the costs of their day, that they actually went back to teaching the old way because it kept people in the anger management group. So it's important that we actually recognize that we are willing to relinquish these captives instead of placing the captives before us. That way we don't rely upon anger to gain our provision. We rely upon truth to move people away from the spirit of anger and into the spirit of truth. So it is God first, situation rises, anger presents, I choose God before I react. Then I allow for God's presence to move me as I release the spirit of anger, present truth in the moment, and embrace God's holy love. It is that simple. That's interesting because many times, like earlier, we had discussed the process of managing anger and the reality that it's more important to release the spiritual anger. This is the same when it comes to anxiety and fears, which many times are born from that place of anger. So we witnessed that in the voting process recently, where so many people are feeling betrayed or misled. So from an anger or hatred or lack of control, they have birthed within themselves anxiety, and they hold a fear for what the outcome could be, short-term and long-term. And again, these situations that we witness, if they are producing this sense of anxiety towards provision, what's this going to do to my life? Oh my God, what's going to happen? What's going to happen to our country? What's going to happen to the changes throughout the world? The bottom line is the sun will come up tomorrow. We are blessed with God's presence within us, and there is nothing that can come against us if we seek God's presence first. From within that understanding, God first, we will know that, wait a minute, I personally am not anxiety. I personally am not fear. However, anxiety is present within me. Fear is present within me. I release the spirit of anxiety. I release the spirit of fear. I embrace within its place God's holy presence, and I choose to trust in faith God's presence within me. And again, this is how simple this process really is to recognize God presence within above the things that stirred us to seek God or to seek anger or to seek and embrace anxiety or fear. It is as simple as God first. I release spiritual anxiety. I release fear. However, if we do these releases, we must embrace God's presence within that place to know God's holy provision. There is no anxiety within me, and there is God's provision there. There is no fear within me, for there is God's presence, and I trust in God and hold faith within God. We are complete, we are whole as we breathe as one in the Ab womb, the living breath that is God's spirit within us. Be blessed. Take care.